The future is not a mystery, it is a pattern whispered by forgotten civilizations, carved into the ruins of fallen capitals, etched into the sky above worlds that once believed themselves eternal. And if you look closely, if you dare to stare directly into the machinery of history, you'll find the same terrifying truth whispered across millennia. Every empire that rises already carries the script of its fall. But what if that script could be read? What if the future of entire civilizations, our civilization, was not chaos but mathematics? What if destiny wasn't written by kings, armies, or revolutions, but by a formula? The first Galactic Empire believed it had escaped the fate of all others. Spanning millions of worlds, shimmering across the spiral arm of the Milky Way, it rose higher, brighter, and longer than any civilization in human history. 12,000 years of dominance, 12,000 years of order, 12,000 years of believing collapse was something that happened to lesser powers, ancient nations on a forgotten planet called Earth. But the universe does not bend to belief, it bends to law, to numbers, to patterns. And on the metal world of Trantor, capital of the Empire, a planet transformed into a single city, one man realized the terrifying truth: future could be predicted. And the Empire was already dying. His name was Hari Seldon. The science he created was psychohistory, and the plan he devised would change the fate of humanity for the next 1,000 years. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before the equations came the silence, before the prophecy came the pattern, before the fall came the illusion of eternity. Come with me now to a world where destiny was written not in stars, but in steel. Trantor, a planet that had forgotten the meaning of sky. Its surface, once filled with forests, seas, valleys, has long since vanished beneath metal plates and city lights. The horizon is a jagged wall of towers stretching endlessly in every direction, like frozen lightning striking upward from the ground. The air smells of ozone and memory. The temperature is perfectly engineered. The breeze is artificial. Even the sunlight filtering through the shield above is carefully calculated, warm enough to comfort, dim enough to keep the towers from overheating. 40 billion people live here. 40 billion souls stacked layer upon layer, from the wealthy garden domes near the sky to the furnace-hot maintenance decks deep below. If Rome was the heart of the ancient world, if Constantinople was the jewel of medieval empire, then Trantor is the brain of a civilization spanning the stars. Everything flows through its arteries: trade, information, taxation, military orders, cultural trends, diplomatic decrees. A million worlds orbit around this one through invisible threads of bureaucracy, economics, and fear. It is a marvel. It is a monstrosity. It is the greatest machine ever built by human hands, and like all machines, it can break. As you walk through Trantor's upper levels, everything feels eternal. Skylanes buzz with silent transports, garden domes shimmer with simulated sunlight, holographic birds sing melodies that once echoed across ancient Earth. Senators glide through marble halls, lined with statues of rulers who lived centuries apart yet look eerily identical. This is the illusion of every empire at its height, that the present is permanent, that stability is forever, that decline is impossible, but the signs of rot are subtle at first. A shipment to the periphery arrives late. A bureaucratic file takes 6 months to process. A planetary governor complains of pirate activity. A star system begins withholding tax. Nothing catastrophic, nothing urgent. But patterns don't reveal themselves in single events. Patterns reveal themselves in trends, and Trantor is full of trends. Energy consumption rising faster than production. Economic output declining on frontier worlds. Administrative delays compounding exponentially, military fleets requiring double maintenance for half effectiveness. All ignorable on their own. Together, they form a curve heading downward. A curve Seldon would one day calculate, a curve that would spell the end. We don't like to imagine the fall of something so massive, so magnificent, so central to our shared identity. That's why Rome ignored the warning signs. That's why the Ottomans dismissed their naval decay. That's why the British Empire believed the sun would never set. That's why modern superpowers assume their influence is immortal. But history is a patient teacher. It whispers the same lesson again and again. Power decays. Systems stagnate. Empires fall. The only question is when. On Trantor, no one wants to ask that question. Instead, they bask in the glow of skyscrapers that pierce the shielded sky. They celebrate festivals honoring 10,000 years of imperial dominance. They parade past statues of cloned emperors who have ruled, uninterrupted, for centuries. But beneath the celebrations lies a truth Trantor cannot afford to admit. The empire has stopped growing, and when a system stops growing, it begins to die. Walk deeper into the city, down past the garden levels, past the commerce decks, into the worker tiers where the lights dim and the air thickens. Here, the illusion trembles. Condensation drips from pipes that should never leak. Maintenance drones spark against corroded rails. Old machinery groans as though exhausted by the weight of centuries. Here, the pulse, the deep mechanical heartbeat of Trantor, does not always beat steadily. Sometimes it stutters. Sometimes it grows faint. Sometimes it stops for a moment too long. Workers glance nervously at one another when that happens, not because they fear immediate catastrophe, but because they recognize the truth. Machines break. Systems falter. Nothing is eternal, not even the Empire, especially not the Empire. Yet above them, high in the polished towers, where the air smells of artificial flowers and recycled luxury, the powerful remain blind. Not because they cannot see the cracks, but because they refuse to. What ruler wants to imagine the end of their world? What senator wants to admit the bureaucracy they worship has grown cancerous? What general wants to accept that the mightiest fleet in human history has become a rusted relic? So they celebrate, they smile, they reassure, they rewrite truth until it becomes comforting fiction. The empire must live, therefore it cannot die. This is how civilizations collapse, not with awareness, but with denial. But in the shadows of this denial, in a quiet academic district lit by soft blue hollow panels, a man works late into the night. A man who does not fear the future, because he has already seen it. Hari Seldon, mathematician, visionary, architect of destiny. He studies population curves, economic drift, political unrest, energy imbalance, cultural stagnation. He feeds the numbers into equations so complex that only a handful of minds in the galaxy can comprehend them. The results are terrifying. They are undeniable. They are absolute. The empire is collapsing. Not in centuries, but in generations. Not in theory, but in fact. And the dark age that follows will last 30,000 years, unless someone intervenes. Unless someone uses the science of prediction not to change the fall, but to shorten the night that follows. Unless someone writes a plan, the Seldon plan, the plan to save the future. But that comes later. Right now we stand on the edge, between the illusion of eternity and the storm of collapse. Right now the empire still believes it is immortal. Right now the future is still a secret. But secrets do not stay hidden forever, and when this one is revealed, it will reshape the destiny of the galaxy. Are you ready to see how an empire dies, and how a new one is born from its ashes? Because this story does not begin with a fall. It begins with a question. Can destiny be predicted and rewritten? History is not a line. It is a cycle that begins with ambition, rises with conquest, stabilizes with bureaucracy, rots through stagnation, and collapses under its own weight. Again and again on Earth, across nations, across centuries, the pattern repeats. And now, across the galaxy, before Trantor dazzled the stars with its metal skin, before the Empire commissioned fleets that could shatter moons, before psychohistory revealed destiny in numbers, humanity lived through countless echoes of this cycle. To understand the fall of the first Galactic Empire, you must first understand the ancient patterns it inherited and repeated. The Roman Empire did not fall when the barbarians breached its walls. It fell when citizens stopped believing in Rome. Byzantium did not fall when Mehmet's cannons roared against its ancient stones. It fell when it exhausted itself in centuries of corruption and decline. The British Empire did not fall because rival nations overwhelmed it. It fell because it stretched itself thin, governing more than it could sustain. Even the great empires of Asia, Han China, the Mauryan Empire, the Abbasid Caliphate, all followed the same script, written long before their founders were born. Every empire begins with hunger. Every empire thrives on momentum. Every empire dies of its own weight. And the greater the empire, the heavier the burden. The first Galactic Empire was the greatest of all. 1,000,000 worlds unified under a single rule. A government so vast it could smother rebellion before the first rallying cry was spoken. A military so powerful that pirate fleets dissolved at the sight of its insignia. A bureaucracy so dense it could catalog every birth, every death, every trade shipment across the spiral arm. But power creates complacency. Complacency invites stagnation. Stagnation breeds collapse. History, like gravity, is relentless. To the citizens of Trantor, the empire seemed different from Rome, Byzantium, or Britain. Rome had been a cluster of continents. The empire held the stars themselves. Rome ruled a few 100 million people. The empire ruled trillions. How could something so vast collapse? How could a system so intricate unravel? How could a force so dominant ever face true decline? The same way all great powers do, slowly, quietly, mathematically. In the early centuries of its rise, the empire expanded with breathtaking speed. Frontier fleets claimed system after system. Diplomats negotiated with planetary governments. Trade networks blossomed like veins across a newborn organism. Hyperlane corridors carried goods, ideas, and culture faster than rebellion could ever travel. This was the empire at its brightest, confident, hungry, united. But expansion has limits. As the empire reached the peak of its size, its edges became harder to control. The cost of maintaining distant star systems rose. Population pressures mounted. Worlds that once felt honored to join the imperial fold began to feel burdened by its demands. Yet the empire pushed forward, convinced that greatness meant growth. Growth became strain. Strain became instability. Instability became decline. The signs of decay mirrored those of empires long gone. In Rome, decadence replaced discipline. In the Galactic Empire, bureaucracy replaced innovation. In Byzantium, political intrigue strangled reform. On Trantor, political stagnation suffocated progress. In the Soviet Union, sclerotic institutions could not adapt to changing realities. In the Empire, the exact same administrative paralysis spread across 1,000,000 worlds. The details differed. The pattern did not. Because empires are not destroyed by external forces, they are hollowed from within. The deeper the decay, the stronger the denial. Roman senators insisted the empire would endure even as Visigoths marched on the capital. Ottoman sultans believed themselves invincible while Europe industrialized around them. Trantor's rulers boasted of eternal dominance, while its infrastructure crumbled beneath the surface. History teaches harsh lessons. Empire leaders rarely listen. The first Galactic Empire told itself a comforting lie. We are too large to fall. But size is not strength. Size is vulnerability. The larger the empire, the more pressure every flaw exerts, the more fragile every system becomes, the more catastrophic every failure grows. The empire's own greatness became its undoing. And yet, decline is not sudden. It is slow erosion, century by century, layer by layer, a missing grain shipment from a rim world, a corrupted official in the Ministry of Logistics, a failing shield generator on a core transport, a colony that refuses to pay tribute, a governor who interprets orders creatively, a fleet that arrives late because planners misread data from 2 years prior. Individually, these mean nothing. Together, they form a pattern, not chaos, not randomness, a trend, a rhythm, a curve. And that curve was already bending downward long before anyone noticed. Long before Hari Seldon's equations revealed it. Long before Trantor burned. As the empire drifted deeper into stagnation, its people continued as if nothing had changed. Cities glittered. Fleets paraded through the sky. Leaders spoke of strength. Citizens felt pride. The empire's flag still hung across 1,000,000 worlds, but every shining empire stands on a foundation of cracks. And those cracks were already spiderwebbing through the galactic colossus. The rise, the peak, the plateau, the decline. The cycle was already well underway. All that remained was the fall. Because somewhere on Trantor, a mathematician was about to prove that collapse was not a possibility. It was destiny. Stand on Trantor's highest tower at dusk. The artificial sky glows with warm gold. Thousands of lights shimmer across the horizon like stars trapped beneath a metallic ocean. Air cars hum along invisible gravity lanes. Crowds flow through sky bridges suspended miles above the surface. Towers reflect towers in endless recursion. It looks eternal. It feels eternal. But eternity is a trick of perception. Lean closer. Listen carefully. Beneath the hum of traffic is a deeper sound, a rumbling vibration that pulses through the metal bones of the planet. The pulse. Trantor's mechanical heartbeat. For 10,000 years, it has throbbed with perfect rhythm, regulating power grids, recycling air, maintaining vital systems across layers upon layers of city infrastructure. But tonight, the pulse stutters. Just once. Barely noticeable, and yet the tremor is enough to send a ripple of unease through the metal beneath your feet. The city feels tired. Descend now. Leave the sky towers behind and enter the mid-level walkways. The air grows warmer, the lights harsher. The scent changes from perfumed ventilation to something more industrial. Lubricants, warm metal, recycled moisture. You walk past an endless sea of hollow terminals where clerks review mountains of data streaming from across the galaxy. Billions of forms, millions of requests, decisions delayed by algorithms designed centuries ago, human hands flying across glowing screens as if fighting a battle they can never win. A clerk sighs. Her screen flashes red, request denied. She tries again. It flashes again, pending review. Her voice trembles. It'll take months. This is not governance. This is entropy. The weight of history presses down like a crushing hand. Go deeper, down metal staircases, past steam-filled corridors. Through pressure-sealed doors humming with age, the air thickens, heat rises, light flickers. This is where the pulse originates. Vast machines tower above you. Ancient reactors encased in layers of protective plating. Pipes run in every direction, dripping moisture onto rusted panels. Steam hisses from cracks in the conduits. Warning lights blink in nervous patterns. A maintenance worker runs a scanner across a heat exchanger. The numbers are wrong. Too high. Another one? His partner groans. It's been running hot for months. They should shut it down, but shutting it down would compromise the power grid of 17 upper-level sectors. So instead, they patch the failing unit with temporary seals, knowing full well it won't last. This is how empires die. Not with explosions, but with compensations. History weighs heavily here. You can feel it in the vibration beneath your feet. You can smell it in the air. You can hear it in the distant groan of overburdened machinery. The entire planet is a relic, a masterpiece of engineering from a time when the empire was young, hungry, ambitious. But that hunger is gone. That ambition is gone. All that remains is maintenance. Endless, desperate maintenance. Like Byzantium reinforcing walls built 1,000 years earlier, like modern megacities repairing century-old pipes beneath skyscrapers of glass. Like aging nations updating outdated power grids while insisting nothing is wrong. History repeats, because humans repeat. Now walk through the lower residential tiers. The ceilings are lower, the lights dimmer, the sound of machinery louder. Families live in cramped metal rooms. Children play near ventilation shafts. Old men sit on crates, listening to archived recordings of Earth's vanished forests. A woman hums a lullaby while stirring nutrient paste heated over a portable burner. This is the human cost of empire. Far above them, nobles dine in floating gardens under artificial constellations. But here, the weight of decline sits heavily on every face. A man mutters about supply shortages. A mother complains about blackouts. A merchant says his shipments are weeks late due to administrative reevaluation. A word that means nothing. A word that means everything. And then, suddenly, the lights flicker. Once. Twice. A silence falls across the corridor. You feel the pulse again. Slower, weaker. A child grabs her mother's hand. "Is the empire breaking?" she whispers. The mother forces a smile. "No, sweetheart, the empire doesn't break." But her eyes say otherwise. The weight of history presses hardest on those forced to carry it. Ordinary people, workers, clerks, students, parents, they feel the strain long before rulers do. They see the cracks forming while the elite gaze at stars, dreaming of glory. Down here, history is not abstract, it is lived. And tonight, as Trantor's pulse stutters again, the lived reality is undeniable. Something vast is shifting. Something old is ending. Something inevitable is drawing near. Because while the people feel the weight of decline in their bones, there are individuals who will soon experience the first tremors of collapse, personally. Human stories are about to ignite the flame. Thomas Wren had been a mid-tier clerk in the Bureau of Sector Communications for 15 years. He processed requests from frontier governors, reviewed shipping manifests, and monitored local unrest reports. Most days were quiet, too quiet. That morning, a message blinked on his interface, urgent priority status, a request from the planet Arctia 9, population 1.2 billion, status, food shortage, request, emergency grain shipment. Thomas forwarded it to the appropriate department, protocol, automatic. Minutes later, the response arrived. Request denied, insufficient resources. Thomas frowned. That wasn't right. Arctia 9 had always been self-sufficient. He checked the latest data. Grain output down 60%. Trade routes disrupted. Shipment delays tripled. Decline was not theoretical. It was happening. Here. Now. He tried appealing to a supervisor. His supervisor simply sighed. "Do your job, Thomas. The Empire knows what it's doing." But Thomas had read the reports. He knew the Empire didn't know what it was doing. He refiled the request manually, attempted an override, filed a secondary alert. Every response was the same. Pending review. Pending review. Pending review. He stared at the words until they blurred. People were starving. Systems were failing. And the Empire's answer was paperwork. Meanwhile, far below, Lyra Dane was repairing a failing coolant conduit in the maintenance decks. She had been doing this job since she was 16. Patching leaks, sealing cracks, replacing ancient components with makeshift parts because replacements no longer existed in any warehouse. The Empire used to manufacture these components. Then it outsourced them. Then the factories closed. Then no one noticed. Machines older than nations now relied on scraps. As Lyra tightened a bolt, the pulse shuddered through the corridor again. It wasn't supposed to do that. "What was that?" her apprentice asked. Lyra wiped sweat from her brow. "It's pressure building. The system's running too hot." "Should we shut it down?" "If we shut it down, half the city loses power." So what do we do? She didn't answer because she didn't know. Elsewhere, in a floating garden high above the struggling tears, Senator Marlowe Vane sipped a glass of shimmering blue liquor as he observed the artificial sunset. Servants moved quietly around him. Marlowe was a loyal son of the Empire. His family had held political office for centuries. He believed in order, in tradition, in the dream of Trantor. His aide approached, trembling slightly. "Sir, you should see this." Marlowe took the hollow pad, a map, a simple one, showing the midrim, entire sectors flashing red. "Political unrest," the aide whispered, "multiple star systems refusing to pay tribute." Marlowe frowned. "This can't be accurate. The Empire is stable." The aide swallowed hard. "Sir, rebellion is spreading." Marlowe set the hollow pad down. "Prepare a statement assuring the citizens that everything is fine." But everything is fine. Denial was not a failure of intelligence, it was a survival mechanism. And somewhere in the quiet academic halls, a man named Hari Seldon watched these stories unfold not as isolated events, but as variables in a vast equation. He saw Thomas's denied requests. He saw Lyra's failing infrastructure. He saw Marlowe's delusion. He plotted their interactions. He fed the numbers into psychohistory. The result did not change. The curve did not shift. The outcome did not bend. Collapse was coming. Not just because the Empire was failing, but because the people within it had lost the ability to imagine anything different. Empires die when people grow blind to alternatives. Empires fall when belief becomes inertia. One evening, Thomas walked home through a crowded corridor, pushing past workers returning from long shifts. A protest erupted nearby, angry citizens demanding answers for energy rationing. Guards arrived, shields raised, voices escalated, a bottle shattered, a baton struck, a scream rang out. Thomas froze. He had seen unrest in reports, but reports were numbers. This was real. This was raw. He realized then that the Empire wasn't holding society together anymore. It was tearing it apart. Lyra felt it too. She stood beneath a flickering light, hands trembling after hours of emergency repairs that solved nothing. Above her, the ventilation fans slowed, another warning sign. Without the fans, the lower levels would suffocate within hours. She reported it to central maintenance. No answer. She reported again. No answer. She looked at the fans, she looked at her team, and she whispered the truth no one dared say. "It's too big to fix." Even Senator Marlowe received a message he couldn't ignore. An encrypted report, routed manually, bypassing the bureaucracy entirely. He opened it. The first line froze his blood. "The Empire will fall within decades." He scrolled further. It was unsigned, untraceable, terrifying. He should have reported it. He didn't. Deep inside himself he knew. 3 lives. 3 stories. 3 sparks. Thomas, Lyra, Marlowe. Different worlds, different classes. Same realization. The pattern was unfolding. The cycle was advancing. The fall had begun, and soon their lives would collide with the mathematician who foresaw everything, because the seeds of collapse have been planted, and the next arc will show how the machinery of destiny begins to turn. At the height of its power, the first Galactic Empire believed it had outsmarted history. Bureaucracy, dense, layered, omnipresent, was its shield against chaos. Ministries, sub-ministries, offices within offices, departments inside departments, an endless lattice of paper pushers and data clerks, all feeding the colossal organism that ruled 1,000,000 worlds. This was order. This was stability. This was civilization perfected, or so the Empire told itself. But empires do not die when enemies attack their borders. They die when their internal machinery becomes too complex to function, and the Galactic Empire had built the most complex machine in human history. Imagine a star system on the rim requesting a shipment of medical supplies. The request must travel through 4 layers of regional administration, 3 layers of central communication, 2 layers of imperial verification, and the labyrinth of interministerial coordination. A single misplaced signature means a 3-month delay. A single error in a data stream means a year. Systems did not respond to needs. Systems responded to procedures. In Rome, bureaucracy choked the army. In Byzantium, it choked the economy. In the Galactic Empire, it choked reality itself. Millions lived or died depending on whether a clerk 3 sectors away pressed the right button. Even the emperor, ensconced in the gleaming imperial palace, did not rule. He presided. The bureaucracy ruled. And bureaucracy, by its nature, decays. The empire's greatest lie was that it was too vast to fall. Its greatest flaw was that it was too vast to govern. At first, the slowdowns were invisible. A delayed census report, a mistimed fleet deployment, a miscalculated energy ration in a cold sector of the mid-rim, isolated, fixable, meaningless. But systems do not fail in isolation. They fail in clusters. 1 delay becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. 100 becomes a systemic trend. The math is simple. If 1 billion tasks must be completed each day, and even 0.1% fail, the empire collapses. Not instantly, not dramatically, quietly, failure by accumulation. And this was the truth Hari Seldon discovered, not through prophecy or intuition, but through data. He studied trade delays. The curve showed exponential growth. He analyzed administrative backlog. The curve bent upward into chaos. He plotted tax compliance across sectors, a long decline with no plateau. He charted population movement, a slow drift from core worlds to the fringes, always a sign of decay. Every variable he measured pointed to the same equation: a system too large, too tangled, too old. Entropy had entered the bloodstream of empire. No decree could purge it. No reform could reverse it. No army could defend against it. Collapse wasn't a threat. It was a conclusion. The math was absolute. But the empire refused to see this, like Rome ignoring failing aqueducts, like Qing China ignoring population strain, like the Soviet Union ignoring resource inefficiency, like modern superpowers ignoring debt, polarization, and infrastructure decay. Every era creates illusions of stability. Every system convinces itself it is unique, but history is a mirror. The empire simply avoided looking into it. Instead, it doubled down on overreach. When worlds complained of heavy taxation, it imposed heavier taxation. When sectors asked for autonomy, it tightened control. When cultures requested tolerance, it mandated uniformity. Every attempt to maintain power accelerated decline. The harder the empire clenched its fist, the more worlds slipped through. Yet the most dangerous illusion of all was the belief that the center was strong. Trantor's towers gleamed, its sky lanes thrummed with movement, its upper levels overflowed with luxury. But strength on the surface means nothing when the foundations crack. Hari Seldon saw those cracks clearly, but he also saw something worse, the pattern of collapse repeating exactly as it had on Earth. He reviewed historical cycles. Population grows, administration expands, inefficiency spreads, distrust rises, periphery rebels, core weakens, collapse follows. Different worlds, different eras, same math. History, he realized, was not random, it was probabilistic. Empires do not fall from surprise, empires fall from inevitability. And the Galactic Empire's decline, fueled by bureaucracy, overreach, and the weight of its own contradictions, was now unstoppable because if the machinery of empire was failing, what about the machinery of fate itself? Imagine standing in the Seldon laboratory, a quiet sanctuary carved into the heart of Trantor. The room is dim, lit by soft blue hollow panels that cast shifting constellations across polished metal floors. Equations float in midair like ghosts, symbols twisting and reforming, numbers spiraling inward toward inevitable conclusions. The air feels heavy here, not with heat or pressure, but with meaning. With destiny, Seldon sits at the center of the room, surrounded by models of human behavior, population clusters glowing blue, economic fluctuations pulsing red, political instabilities vibrating like plucked strings. The future hums around him. He closes his eyes and listens, not with ears, but with intellect. What others see as chaos, he sees as rhythm. What others call unpredictability, he calls mathematics. He can hear the empire dying. Step closer, look at the equations drifting above him. Curves, trend lines, statistical flows. They resemble rivers converging toward a waterfall, smooth at first, then turbulent, then violently sharp. That sharp point is collapse, a single century of chaos, a single curve of madness. Follow the line beyond the collapse and you find darkness. Not metaphorical darkness, literal darkness, 30,000 years of regression, of lost knowledge, of disconnected worlds, of violence and isolation and forgotten science. Unless something intervenes, unless a plan is written, unless destiny is negotiated with mathematics, but can destiny be calculated? Seldon believes, yes, not the destiny of individuals. They are unpredictable wild cards, variables too chaotic to chart, but masses, crowds, civilizations. They obey rules, patterns, statistical laws as rigid as gravity. A single person is chaos. 1,000,000 people are a curve, and 1,000,000,000,000 people. A pattern as clear as a galaxy's spiral arm. Seldon studies these patterns not coldly, but with reverence. What others call history, he sees as geometry. What others call politics, he sees as physics. What others call fate, he sees as probability. The empire will fall. Not because of villains, not because of rebels, not because of weakness, but because the math demands it. Move deeper into the lab, smell the faint ozone of charged hollow particles. Feel the hum of energy beneath the floor. Run your hand along a table scattered with ancient books, earth histories, philosophy texts, archived economic data from long-vanished nations. He reads Marcus Aurelius beside population graphs. He studies Gibbon's Rome beside psychohistorical simulations. He analyzes the fall of the Soviet Union beside the drift of galactic trade. To Seldon, the past is not past. It is a laboratory of collapse. Each empire is a data set, each downfall a case study, each catastrophe a clue. The fall of Rome offers insights. The fall of Byzantium clarifies them. The fall of the British Empire sharpens them. The rise and stall of modern megastates completes the picture. Seldon is not inventing fate. He is revealing it. And yet, there is emotion here too. Look at him as he pauses before an equation. His brow furrows. His hand trembles slightly. He is not fearless. He is terrified, because destiny cuts both ways. If collapse is inevitable, if the Dark Age is unavoidable, if 30,000 years of barbarism cannot be stopped, then psychohistory becomes a funeral science. Its only purpose, to predict suffering. Unless the curve can be bent, not reversed, never reversed, but shortened, guided, directed. 1,000 years instead of 30,000, a millennium of rebuilding instead of 30 millennia of chaos, a path through darkness, not hope strategy, not optimism, calculation. As the simulations run, the room fills with sound, soft chimes marking catastrophic events decades apart. Each chime marks a crisis, a turning point, a Seldon crisis, moments where humanity must choose the correct path or surrender to thousands of years of collapse. Seldon watches the chimes, listens to them, feels them. Can you feel it with him? The heavy tension of inevitability, the ache of knowing a civilization is too vast to save, the weight of understanding that even success means 1,000 years of suffering. He breathes slowly, deeply, not out of calm, but out of despair, and yet, beneath that despair is brilliance, fire, conviction. If destiny is a machine, Seldon will learn to operate it. If collapse is a law, he will make it predictable. If the Empire must die, he will script its death, not to destroy humanity, to preserve it. And outside this lab, beyond these glowing equations, the Empire remains blind. Senators insist everything is stable. Generals boast of eternal fleets. Citizens enjoy the sparkle of artificial skylines. They do not hear the pulse falter. They do not feel history tightening its grip. They do not know that the numbers have already sealed their fate. But Seldon knows, and destiny knows him. Because while Seldon calculates the future, the people trapped in the present are about to collide with the machinery of fate. Thomas Wren's office felt smaller than ever. He stared at a message from Arctia 9, the same famine-stricken world he'd tried to help weeks earlier. This message was not a request. It was a warning. Food riots spreading, government losing control, casualties rising. Thomas forwarded it. Again, he pinged departments. Again, he escalated it. Again, nothing. The system was drowning in its own rules. He felt something break inside him, not loudly but quietly, like the snapping of a thread. His job wasn't helping people. His job was feeding a broken machine. Meanwhile, Lyra Dane was kneeling beside a coolant pipe that had finally ruptured. Steam billowed like a ghost, screaming into the corridor. She pressed a sealant patch against the crack, her skin burning from the heat. Her apprentice shouted, "It's not holding!" "I know!" she yelled back. They were losing control, not of a system, of a planet. The Empire's heart was overheating, and Lyra knew the truth. If the lower coolant systems failed, the entire infrastructure above them, hundreds of billions of people, would feel the consequences. Trantor could choke. Trantor could burn. Trantor could die. Yet maintenance teams like hers were invisible to the world above. She slammed a second patch on the pipe, then a third. Temporary fixes, always temporary. She felt tears sting her eyes, not from the heat, from helplessness. "This is impossible," she whispered. In the floating gardens, Senator Marlowe Vane received another encrypted report. This one worse. 3 sectors had ceased communication. One had declared independence. Another had destroyed an imperial outpost. Marlowe poured himself a drink with trembling hands. Could the Empire truly be dying? He walked to the balcony. The artificial sky shone beautifully above the towers. Perfect, serene, a lie. He stared down at the city and felt a crack open in his mind. The first crack in his belief that Trantor was eternal. He whispered, "What have we done?" And in a corner of the academic district, Hari Seldon received news too. Riots spreading, sectors rebelling, infrastructure failing. He did not panic. He did not despair. He simply added the data to his equations. The curve tightened. The timeline sharpened. The inevitable approached. He whispered to himself, "It has begun." Not the collapse. The cascade. The moment when individuals begin to feel the weight of destiny pressing down on their lives. That evening, Thomas walked home through a corridor lit by flickering lights. He saw a crowd gathered around a protest sign. "We starve while Trantor feasts." He wanted to shout that he'd tried, that he'd cared, that he'd fought the system. Instead, he stayed silent, because he knew the truth. He was part of the system. A cog inside a failing machine. Lyra stood alone in the maintenance decks after her shift, staring at a wall of emergency notices. System overheating, power grid unstable, ventilation compromised. Her exhaustion felt cosmic. Then she heard it, the pulse. Slow, weak, faltering, her breath caught. The heart of the Empire was failing. Marlowe Vane sat alone in his garden dome, the smell of artificial blossoms filling the air. He reread the encrypted report. Collapse within decades. A dark age inevitable. Imperial failure accelerating. He felt sick. For the first time in his life, he wondered, what if we've already lost? Human stories, human pain, human fear. Not on the frontier, not in rebel worlds. Here, on Trantor, the center of power, the core of civilization, the place that was supposed to be eternal. The first tremors were here. And soon these lives, Thomas, Lyra, Marlowe, would intersect with the man whose equations explained everything, Hari Seldon. Because destiny is not abstract anymore. It is personal, it is accelerating, and the empire is running out of time. There are moments in history when a single idea becomes a force of nature, not because it is loud or violent, but because it is true. Psychohistory was one such idea. Hari Seldon did not seek to be a prophet. He did not crave power. He did not desire fame or influence. He sought only one thing: understanding. Understanding why civilizations rise, understanding why they fall, understanding whether humanity's greatest cycles, thousands of years long, were as predictable as the tides. He believed they were. He believed history, stripped of personalities and details, could be reduced to mathematics, and that belief would ignite the most extraordinary intellectual revolution in galactic history. To understand Seldon, you must understand the man he once was. He had grown up in a remote academic district on Helicon, far from the glitter of Trantor. Unlike most great thinkers of the past, he had not been raised in luxury. His childhood was filled with dusty libraries, simple meals, and long nights beneath an open sky, watching stars swirl in cold, silent patterns. Even then, the patterns fascinated him. While others saw constellations, he saw geometry. While others saw stars, he saw systems. While others saw myth, he saw mathematics. Helicon shaped him. Trantor changed him, but psychohistory defined him. When he arrived on Trantor as a young academic, he expected to find brilliance. What he found was bureaucracy. The intellectual heart of the galaxy was not a temple of knowledge. It was a maze of committees, approvals, and stagnation. Scholars spent more time filing paperwork than conducting research. Projects stalled, innovations suffocated. But Seldon worked in the quiet margins, ignoring politics, ignoring tradition, ignoring reputation. In a cramped, dimly lit office lit by a single flickering hololamp, he began constructing the foundations of a science no one believed possible. He started with population dynamics. Simple at first: growth curves, migration flows, density distributions. Then he added economics, then culture, then psychology, then sociology, then historical cycles. Individually, each field was chaotic. Together, they formed a pattern so consistent it defied disbelief. Millions of people behave unpredictably. Billions behave statistically. Trillions behave mathematically. The bigger the system, the clearer the pattern. Seldon had discovered the laws of mass humanity. And like any law, once discovered, it revealed uncomfortable truths. Seldon's early simulations shocked even him. Every scenario, every variable, every permutation. They all led to the same outcome: a fall, a catastrophic fall, a fall that would plunge the galaxy into darkness for 30,000 years. Not because of a single event, not because of a tyrant or rebellion or catastrophe, but because of entropy. The empire was too old, too sprawling, too rigid, too dependent on its own myth of permanence. Collapse was not a possibility. Collapse was a certainty. And in the face of that certainty, Seldon refused to despair. Instead, he asked, what if the future could be shaped? What if destiny was malleable? What if collapse could be controlled, redirected, shortened? Psychohistory did not predict doom. It offered a way through doom. He refined the models. He built predictive engines. He trained students. He wrote equation after equation, so many that the air of his lab shimmered with floating variables and colored curves. He discovered Seldon crises, flashpoints where humanity could either fracture or unify. He mapped them like stepping stones across a river of chaos. He found the line of least destruction. The Seldon Plan, 1,000 years instead of 30,000. A civilization reborn, not lost. But to implement the plan, the Empire had to accept its own mortality, and that was something Trantor could not do. His colleagues dismissed him. His peers mocked him. The Imperial Cabinet ignored him. But the numbers remained. The simulations remained. The proof remained. And soon, others would see it too. Not because they wanted to, but because reality was starting to mirror Seldon's predictions. Riots, supply shortages, rebellion, administrative failure. The cracks had become fractures. The fractures were becoming fault lines. The galaxy was shifting onto the path Seldon had charted long ago. And Trantor, still dazzling, still proud, was drifting toward the edge of inevitability. Because psychohistory was no longer just a theory. It was about to become a weapon. There is a strange smell in the air of Seldon's private lecture hall. Chalk dust, antiquated, ancient, out of place on the polished metal floors of Trantor. Seldon preferred chalk to hollow ink for one reason. It reminded him that predictions must be made by hand. The room is silent except for the soft scrape of chalk against board, a sound so delicate it might be mistaken for the whisper of wings. Equations unfurl in elegant arcs. Symbols twist and bend. Curves rise and fall. Students watch in awe. They know they are witnessing the birth of something mythic. But the equation Seldon draws today is different from all others. It is the equation of civilization's lifespan, a simple arc, one gentle rise, one long plateau, one slow decline. He circles the decline. This, he says softly, is where we are. A chill spreads through the students. This, he continues, tapping the board, is where we are headed. He draws a vertical line downward, sharp, abrupt. Collapse. And then he draws another line below it, long, stretching thousands of figurative years across the board. Dark age, no one breathes. Then Seldon draws one more line, shorter, steeper, controlled. 1,000 years. Free will cannot prevent collapse, he says, but free will can choose the shape of what comes after. A hand rises a student, fearful, curious. Professor, are you saying fate is fixed? Seldon smiles gently. No, fate is a river. But we may guide its flow. The student presses, but if the masses behave predictably, if the future is already written in probability curves, then what of individual choice? Seldon wipes chalk dust from his fingers. A single individual is unpredictable, he says. 1,000 individuals are influential. 1,000,000 individuals are of force. 1,000,000,000,000 individuals are destiny. He pauses, but individuals matter in one way. They create the narrative. The room leans closer. Empires fall not because numbers demand it, but because people allow it. Because leaders fail. Because citizens accept stagnation. Because systems rot without renewal. He points to the collapse curve. This is not punishment, this is consequence. But a deeper question lingers. If destiny is statistically inevitable, if collapse is mathematically certain, if psychohistory maps the next 1,000 years, is the future still alive, or is it merely unfolding? This is where Seldon's philosophy becomes terrifying. He does not claim to predict every moment. He claims to predict the shape of moments. Not which worlds will rebel, but that rebellion will rise. Not who will ignite conflict, but that conflict is guaranteed. Not where the spark will land, but that the powder is everywhere. The empire of Trantor is not doomed because Seldon says so. Seldon says so because the empire is doomed. Free will exists within the margins. Destiny exists within the trend. A man can choose his path. A civilization cannot. A person is a story. A civilization is an equation. Seldon's greatest fear was not that people would deny his predictions. His greatest fear was that people would deny the consequences of ignoring them. Destiny is not cruel, he said once. It is mathematical. But the idea that the future could be predicted ignited firestorms across Trantor's academic and political circles. Philosophers raged that Seldon was stripping humanity of free will. Politicians fumed that he was undermining imperial authority. Religious leaders accused him of blasphemy. And yet, quietly, secretly, many were terrified because they knew he was right. The empire was declining. Everyone felt it. Everyone saw it. Everyone feared it. Seldon simply had the courage to say it. One night, after a long lecture, Seldon stood alone in the silent hall. He stared at the chalkboard, at the collapse curve that haunted him. He reached out and smudged the long, dark age with his thumb. Then he drew a new line, shorter, brighter, 1,000 years. Hope, not the hope of salvation, not the hope of avoiding collapse, the hope of surviving it. He whispered to the empty room, "The plan will hold. It must. Because fate has been calculated, and now fate is about to confront the empire itself." It began with a summons, a simple message delivered to Seldon's lab by a trembling courier. "Hari Seldon, you are to appear before the Commission of Public Safety." The empire had finally noticed him, not his equations, not his predictions, not his warnings. Him. Seldon knew what this meant. The empire was afraid, and when empires fear, they lash out. The commission chamber was a vast dome of steel and glass, its vaulted ceiling reflecting the cold light of interrogation beams. Senators sat in raised tiers, their faces carved from stone. Officers of the Imperial Guard stood motionless, hands resting on holstered weapons. Hollow screens glowed with Seldon's equations, projected without his consent. The room was a theater. The trial was a performance. The verdict had already been written. Seldon stepped forward. He did not bow. He did not tremble. He simply waited. The lead commissioner rose. "Hari Seldon," he said, voice booming across the dome, "you stand accused of treason." Gasps murmured through the audience. Treason against the empire. Treason by predicting its collapse. Treason by spreading fear. Treason by mathematics. Seldon raised an eyebrow. "Treason by mathematics?" he said quietly. "Is that a crime now?" Silence swept the chamber. The commissioner leaned forward. "You claim the empire will fall." "I do not claim," Seldon replied. "I calculate. You predict a dark age lasting 30,000 years. Unless action is taken. You intend to take that action?" "I intend to shorten the darkness," Seldon said calmly. The chamber buzzed. Shorten the darkness. Not stop the collapse. Not preserve the empire. Shorten the darkness. The senators were horrified. "You dare suggest," one barked, "that the empire is doomed?" Seldon met his gaze. "I do more than suggest." He gestured to the glowing curves above them. "I prove it." A younger senator slammed his fist onto the railing. "This is sedition. You undermine the morale of the citizenry." Seldon's voice remained soft. "Math is indifferent to sedition," another senator sneered. "You believe you are a prophet. I am a scientist. And you believe your numbers overrule the emperor? No number overrules the emperor, but no emperor overrules probability." The chamber erupted in shouts. Seldon remained still. Finally, a senior commissioner rose, an old man with weary eyes. "Hari Seldon," he asked quietly, "is there nothing we can do to prevent collapse?" Seldon looked at him with unexpected tenderness. "No, my friend, collapse is inevitable." The chamber fell silent. He continued, "But the dark age that follows need not be long." Hope flickered across faces. Seldon crushed it gently. "But it cannot be prevented, only shortened." "You speak of a plan," the commissioner said. "Yes. A plan that requires exile to the edge of the galaxy." "Yes. A plan that requires a foundation." A murmur filled the dome. Seldon nodded. "To preserve knowledge, to guide future generations, to ensure humanity rises again." The commissioner leaned back, exhausted. "You would have us accept the empire's death?" Seldon shook his head. "I would have you accept reality." Then came the final question. "What if we imprison you? What if we silence you? What if we forbid your plan?" Seldon smiled. "The plan does not require me," he said softly. It has already begun. Shock rippled across the chamber. Already begun? Students had been trained, smaller groups had been selected, seeds of knowledge had been planted, simulations had been run. The machinery of fate was already moving. The commissioners withdrew for deliberation. The room buzzed like a hive struck with a stone. Thomas Wren sat in the back, watching. He'd come out of curiosity, but now he realized he was witnessing history. Lyra Dane watched the broadcast on a maintenance deck screen, the glow illuminating her exhausted face. Marlowe Vane sat frozen in his garden dome, watching from afar, his drink forgotten. Every citizen felt the same chill. The Empire was being put on trial. Not Seldon. The commissioners returned. The lead commissioner cleared his throat. "Hari Seldon," he declared, "you will not be executed." A gasp. "But you will be exiled." Seldon nodded calmly. "You and your followers will travel to Terminus, a desolate world at the edge of the galaxy." A ripple of dread. "There, you will compile the Encyclopedia Galactica, a project we believe harmless." Seldon bowed his head. He knew the commissioners believed in the encyclopedia. He also knew the encyclopedia was a smokescreen. The real purpose of Terminus was the foundation, the heart of the plan, the spark of the next civilization. The trial had failed to stop him. The Empire had unknowingly approved its successor. As guards escorted him from the chamber, Seldon looked up at the senators, these proud, frightened rulers of a dying empire. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply said, "The future is not yours to control, but it can still be saved." And then he walked out the door into exile, into destiny, into legend. Across the city, reactions erupted. Thomas whispered, "He wasn't predicting collapse. He was warning us." Lyra whispered, "He's right. The system is failing." Marlowe whispered, "What have we done to ourselves?" Millions whispered the same question. What comes next? Because the Empire has been warned, the plan has begun, and the future now marches toward its first great catastrophe. Empires do not fall when armies lose battles. They fall when armies forget why they fight. The first Galactic Empire once commanded the most unstoppable military force in human history. Battlecruisers capable of vaporizing continents, planetary garrisons armed with precision-guided plasma arrays, fleet formations that moved like a single metallic organism across the void. But power erodes quietly, like rust hidden beneath a coat of paint. And by the time Hari Seldon walked out of the commission chamber, the Empire's fleets were already ghosts of their former glory. The decline began centuries earlier, much the same way Rome's did. Rome's legions grew bloated with politics and corruption. The Empire's fleets grew strangled by bureaucracy. Rome hired foreign mercenaries. The Empire outsourced ship maintenance to private contractors. Rome let its generals grow arrogant and complacent. The Empire let its admirals cling to tradition instead of innovation. The echoes were unmistakable. Historians on Earth would have seen the signs instantly, but the Galactic Empire believed itself immune to the past. "When you control 1,000,000 worlds," the admiral said, "no frontier uprising can threaten you." They were wrong, because great empires do not fall from without. They fall from within. Consider the Battle of Ithrion's Cross, fought 50 years before the Seldon trial. A minor rebellion, a trivial conflict, a test the Empire should have passed without effort, but the Imperial fleet arrived low on fuel. Their targeting systems malfunctioned. Half their ships were crewed by undertrained reserve personnel, and the commanding admiral couldn't access the latest intelligence because the bureaucratic request was still pending review. The Empire won the battle. Barely. But the cracks were visible. Afterward, one analyst wrote, "The Empire survives not on strength, but inertia." He was quietly dismissed. Then came the second Scarborn uprising. Not because rebels were strong, but because the Empire was distracted. A routine military deployment required authorization from 9 separate ministries. 2 of them disagreed on the definition of urgent. The fleet launched 3 months late. By then, Scarborn had united system after system not out of ideology, out of hunger. Starving worlds revolt faster than angry ones. When the Empire's fleet finally arrived, their ships suffered cascading failures. Heat regulators malfunctioned. Navigation arrays flickered. Entire squadrons drifted off course into uncharted debris fields. The Empire won again, but at staggering cost. Victory had become indistinguishable from failure. There is a moment in all dying empires when the military becomes theater Rome, held parades even as its borders burned. Byzantium held ceremonies even as its treasury emptied. The Galactic Empire held fleet reviews over Trantor, displaying ships that barely functioned. Citizens cheered at the gleaming hulls. They never saw the failing engines beneath. Admirals swore loyalty to the throne, but they no longer trusted their own equipment. Soldiers marched in perfect formations, but they whispered about shortages, delayed pay, and phantom supplies that existed only in database errors. The Empire's breath was weakening, and the day would come when it stopped altogether. That day arrived sooner than anyone expected. It began when the outer marches, long neglected, long exploited, long unheard, finally snapped, not a rebellion, a fracture. One world declared independence, then another, then 3 more. The Empire responded with fury. Admirals demanded punitive action. Senators demanded a show of force. The Emperor's clones demanded loyalty. And so a fleet was dispatched. The grandest fleet in centuries, an attempt to remind the galaxy who ruled. But when the fleet arrived, half its ships never left hyperspace. Navigation errors scattered them across parsecs. Communications failed. Supply lines broke. The fleet commander, Admiral Var Drex, sent one final message before disappearing into the void. The Empire is no longer a military power. It is a memory. The shockwaves rippled across the galaxy. On Trantor, the news was censored, but rumors spread faster than truth. Thomas Wren heard whispers in the bureau. Fleets missing. Worlds defecting. Admirals begging for support. Lyra Dane heard it from maintenance engineers. The Empire's power grids are failing planet-wide. If the military collapses, everything collapses. Senator Marlowe Vane heard it from an encrypted report. Trantor is no longer safe. The Rim is gone. And Hari Seldon, he simply added the data to his models. The collapse curve tightened. The timeline accelerated. The Empire's fall was no longer near. It was beginning. Suspense hook, because when empires lose their armies, they lose their breath. Trantor always sounded alive, the hum of the pulse, the whir of sky cars, the distant vibration of machinery turning beneath metal skin. 40 billion breaths exhaled into the artificial sky, but tonight something is wrong. Trantor sounds empty. Far above the surface, soft lights flicker across the shielded atmosphere. Emergency beacons, alert signals, shutdown warnings. The Empire's energy grid is failing. Not all at once, not dramatically, but flicker by flicker, sputter by sputter, breath by breath. You walk through the upper levels and feel it immediately. A strange stillness hangs over the towers, like air that has forgotten to move. Crowds gather around hollow screens broadcasting emergency announcements. Temporary outages, minor disturbances remain calm. But panic is contagious, and fear spreads faster than truth. On level 12, a grocery dome closes abruptly. People pound on sealed doors, shouting for food. On level 44, an aircar lane shuts down. Vehicles collide in midair like panicked birds. On level 91, a power fluctuation forces a hospital to run on limited reserves. Doctors scramble in the dim light. Everywhere, the pulse weakens. The planet is exhaling for the last time. Now descend. past the shimmering gardens of the elite, past the office towers filled with silent hollow panels, down to the mid-levels where the lights flicker like candles in a storm. This is where the collapse becomes tangible. A vendor screams as his kiosk powers down mid-transaction. Children cry as amusement domes go dark. Transit rails grind to a halt with a metallic screech. You hear it then, a crack, not physical, psychological. The crack in public faith. Faith is the scaffolding of empires. When it breaks, structures fall. And then, somewhere below, a muffled boom shakes the floor. A transformer explodes in the lower tiers. Sparks rain down like dying stars. Emergency shutters close. Ventilation slows. Someone shouts, "Is this an attack?" Another voice answers, "No, this is failure." The word spreads like flame. Failure. 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 On level 3, the poorest residents gather around a ruptured steam conduit. Heat pours into the corridor. The air grows suffocating. Lyra Dane is there, face smeared with soot, eyes burning. She shouts to her team, "Seal it! Now!" But seals require power, and power is dying. She grabs a manual override. Her hands blister as she forces it shut. The corridor cools. Barely. She sinks to the ground, exhausted. A child watches her with wide, terrified eyes. "Is the Empire ending?" the child whispers. Lyra wants to say no. She wants to promise safety. But she cannot lie today.
Stay close to your family. Above, Thomas Wren stares at his terminal in disbelief. Requests flash across the screen. Emergency rations, riot suppression, medical aid, evacuations. The system crashes. Reboots. Crashes again. He looks around. His entire office is panicking. "This shouldn't be happening," a colleague cries. Thomas whispers, "It was always happening. We just didn't see it." Another boom echoes from the lower levels. Thomas feels the floor tremble. Trantor is shaking, and empires tremble the moment before they fall. High in his garden dome, Senator Marlowe Vane watches the city darken lights wink out across the horizon. One tower after another slips into shadow. He steps onto his balcony. The wind tastes like metal and fear. He hears distant sirens, rare on Trantor, almost mythic. His aide rushes in, breathless. "Sir, security recommends leaving the tower. There are reports of—" The tower shakes. A deep, resonant groan rises from the foundations. Marlowe grips the railing. "What is happening?" The aide stares at him with haunted eyes. "Sir, the Empire is failing." Now listen. Far below, where the pulse once throbbed with life, a deep, grinding noise spreads through the metal layers. It sounds like the groan of a dying colossus. Then, silence. A silence so complete it feels impossible. Trantor has stopped breathing. When the pulse halts, everything halts. Doors stick, lights flicker, air thins, heat rises, movement stops. Someone screams, someone prays, someone faints. Trantor trembles again, a long, shuddering vibration that knocks objects from shelves and sends dust swirling down from the ceilings, and then the fires start. Not everywhere, not all at once. But enough. A short circuit. A ruptured gas line. A malfunctioning generator. Flames erupt in a lower-tier corridor. They race upward through vents and maintenance shafts. Fire on Trantor is catastrophic. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to escape. A world of metal becomes a world of heat. Picture it, sky lanes glowing red, towers flickering in the shadows, people running through smoke-filled walkways, drones failing mid-flight and plummeting into the streets, children screaming for parents, sirens drowned out by the roar of flame. This is how empires die, not in battles, in systems failure, not in one moment, in 1,000 small collapses converging all at once, not with dignity, with panic, not with strength, with fire. Suspense hook, because from the ashes of this collapse, new alliances and new destinies will be forged.
The first sunrise after the collapse is not truly a sunrise. Trantor has no natural sky, no dawn, no horizon. But when the fires dim and the emergency lights flicker back to life, the world looks different. The air is smoky. The towers are scarred. Crowds move like ghosts through the shadows. The Empire is not dead, not yet, but it is wounded. Mortally. Thomas Wren emerges from a damaged transit tunnel, coughing. His uniform is scorched, his terminal lost. He stumbles into the open plaza outside Bureau Tower 4. What he sees stops him cold. Lines of people waiting for food, families carrying injured relatives, bureaucrats arguing with soldiers, children sleeping on broken crates. His world, built on rules, order, endless paperwork, has collapsed into chaos. A woman approaches him. "Are you with the Bureau?" she asks. He nods weakly. "Can you help us?" she whispers. He looks around. There is no system, no structure, no chain of command, for the first time in his life. Thomas Wren gives a direct answer. "No," he says, "but I can try." Something shifts in him, a realization. When the Empire collapses, ordinary people must choose who they become. Victims, predators, survivors. Thomas chooses survivor. In the lower tiers, Lyra Dane wakes on the floor of a maintenance room, surrounded by coughing workers. They made it through the fires. Barely. She stands slowly. Her muscles ache. Her arms are burned. Her lungs sting with smoke, but she is alive. And as she looks around, she sees others waiting for instruction. "Lyra," her apprentice whispers, "what do we do?" For years, she lived in fear of the Empire's failure. Now that it has come, she finds unexpected clarity. "We repair what we can," she says. "We help who we can. We survive." She grabs her tools. Her hands tremble, but she works. Because survival is not a hope. It is a choice. And repairing even one conduit is an act of defiance against collapse. In his shattered garden dome, Senator Marlowe Vane watches the city burn. Smoke curls across the artificial sky. The distant glow of flames reflects in his glass. His aide approaches quietly. "Sir, the Emperor wants all senators to gather in the Hall of Governance." Marlowe does not turn. "What's the point?" The aide trembles. "Sir, please." "Look at it," Marlowe whispers. "Our world is dying." Fear cracks his voice. He had spent his life believing in Trantor's invincibility. Now he understands the truth. Belief does not stop entropy. Loyalty does not stop collapse. Pride does not stop history. Only action does. He turns to his aide. "Send a message," he says quietly. "To whom?" Marlowe takes a breath. "To the Foundation." On the outskirts of the capital district, Hari Seldon watches the fires through a cracked window in a nearly abandoned academic hall. He is not shocked. He is not horrified. He is not triumphant. He is sad. "Even when predicted," he murmurs, "suffering remains suffering." His students gather behind him, young faces, frightened, awestruck, resolute. "Is this the first Seldon crisis?" one asks. Seldon nods. "It is the beginning. The Empire's decline has become visible, irreversible. The plan proceeds." A student swallows hard. "Should we do something to help?" Seldon turns to face them. "You are doing something, you are leaving." They stare. "Prepare yourselves," he says gently. Terminus awaits. The Foundation begins not with triumph, but with escape, not with power, but with purpose, not with glory, but with quiet resolve. As the fires smolder and emergency drones buzz overhead, small groups of people begin gathering in corners of the city. Not soldiers, not senators, not bureaucrats, survivors, mothers holding children, engineers carrying tools, scholars clutching data slates, merchants guarding crates of supplies. Whispers spread through the crowds. They say the Empire is finished. They say Seldon predicted this. They say there's a plan. They say there's hope. Hope, a word long forgotten, now reborn. Night falls again, or something like night. Trantor's lights are dim, the stars are hidden behind layers of smoke. The towers glow faintly, like dying embers of a once mighty fire. Thomas keeps watch over a group of families near a collapsed walkway. Lyra repairs a water recycler with tools scavenged from debris. Marlowe writes a message that will become the turning point of his life. Seldon prepares for departure. And throughout the city, people whisper the same question. What comes after the Empire? The answer travels in hushed tones, the foundation. Trantor is broken, but something is awakening. In the ash of collapse, in the dust of fallen towers, in the silence after the pulse stops beating, a new future stirs, not loud, not triumphant, not sweeping, fragile, tentative, but real. A future built not on bureaucracy, not on military power, not on illusions of eternal rule, but on knowledge, on understanding, on the idea that even in darkness, the seeds of rebirth can grow, and as the surviving citizens huddle together for warmth, they remember a quiet truth. Empires die, but humanity endures. This is not the end, it is the beginning. The beginning of the long night, and the beginning of the only plan capable of guiding humanity through it. Suspense hook, the doorway to the final chapter, because from the ruins of Trantor, the foundation now prepares to rise. The fires of Trantor smolder for days. Metal towers, once symbols of a civilization's unshakable confidence, now glow red with heat, their structural plates warped and buckled. Emergency drones flit through the smoke, scanning for survivors. The skies, once perfectly engineered, flicker intermittently between darkness and artificial light. The pulse, the mechanical heartbeat of a world, remains silent. A planet that felt eternal now lies trembling, wounded, gasping for air. And yet, something moves through the ruins, not armies, not bureaucrats, not senators, people, human beings picking their way through the remains of their world. Because even when empires die, people endure. Thomas Wren stands in what was once the plaza outside Bureau Tower 4. The tower has partially collapsed. Its top floors lie in a twisted heap of metal and shattered glass. The sight still feels unreal, impossible wrong. Thomas was raised to believe Trantor was the center of the galaxy, the heartbeat of human civilization. To see it broken, smoking, silent, is like seeing a god bleed. He looks around. Citizens gather in makeshift groups. Mothers wave down medical drones. Merchants pass out salvaged food. Workers haul debris from blocked corridors. For the first time in his life, Thomas sees no hierarchy. No overseers, no supervisors, no proper channels. People simply act. No bureaucracy, no approvals, just survival. He steps forward to help lift a fallen beam, surprised by the strength surging through his limbs. The Empire may be dying, he thinks. But life is not far below. In a dim and sweltering maintenance deck, Lyra Dane tightens the last bolt on a patchwork water recycler she rebuilt from scavenged parts. The unit thumps alive. A small jet of fresh water pours uninterrupted into a waiting container. The workers around her cheer. A child claps.
An old man wipes tears from his soot-stained cheeks. Lyra leans back against a cold pillar, exhausted but smiling for the first time in days. "We'll rebuild this section," she says softly, "piece by piece." Her apprentice nods. "Do you think the Empire will help us?" Lyra shakes her head. The Empire couldn't even help itself. She touches the humming recycler, listening to its rhythmic thrum, the only pulse still beating in this part of the city. "No," she whispers, "it's up to us now." High above them, in a half-collapsed garden dome missing entire sections of its once luxurious ceiling, Senator Marlowe Vane watches smoke drift upward like silent prayers. His silken robes are charred, his manicured hair is singed, his once impeccable shoes are coated in ash. But his eyes look sharper than they ever have. The aide beside him says nothing, sensing the transformation unfolding within the senator. Marlowe stares at the ruined skyline, at the wounded towers that once defined his world. "My entire life," he murmurs,
I believed the Empire was eternal, that it could not fall, that its strength was our strength. The age shifts uneasily. Sir, we need to convene with the remaining senators. Marlowe turns, his expression almost pitying. Senators? He gestures to the ruins. What can senators do? Debate the collapse? Vote on the ashes? He steps toward a damaged console. The screen flickers weakly. He types a message anyway. Encrypted, quiet, desperate. To the Foundation. We need guidance. He presses send. Marlowe Vane, loyal servant of the old order, has taken his first step into the new. And in a quiet hall far from the chaos, Hari Seldon stands surrounded by his students and the few remaining Foundation members. Their bags are packed. Their equipment is secured. The plan is in motion. But for a moment, just a moment, Seldon lets himself gaze out a cracked window at the wounded planet Trantor has fallen. The Empire is breathing its last. The first Seldon crisis has arrived. He closes his eyes. The sounds of the city reach him through the shattered glass. The distant roar of fires, the cries of survivors, the rumble of failing power grids, the hum of drones searching desperately for life beneath the debris. He does not smile. He does not bask in vindication. He mourns. Even the most accurate prophecy cannot soften the pain of seeing it fulfilled. One of his students approaches. Sir, it's time. Seldon nods. Gather the others. It's time to leave. He takes one last look at Trantor. An age is ending, he whispers, but another will begin. The shuttles depart quietly. No ceremony, no salute, no applause. They slip into the sky like whispers fleeing a burning library, carrying with them the most precious cargo in the galaxy: knowledge, memory, humanity's last chance at a guided future. Inside one shuttle, students huddle around Seldon. Some are terrified, others gaze defiantly into the stars. Seldon speaks softly. The Empire needed to fall so that something new could rise. They listen with rapt attention. The Foundation is not an escape from destiny. It is the shaping of destiny. We cannot stop the Dark Age ahead, but we can make it shorter, kinder, less cruel. A student swallows hard. Will we succeed? Seldon looks at the glowing star map projecting Terminus into view. We must. Back on Trantor, the fires finally settle. Emergency lights flicker back online. The first semblance of order returns, not imposed by the Empire, but created by survivors. Lyra Dane oversees the restoration of power to her tier. Thomas Wren organizes a distribution line for food and supplies. Marlowe Vane quiets panicked citizens with a recorded message urging unity across the entire planet. Small pockets of leadership emerge organically, not from titles, not from ranks, not from imperial decree, from necessity. This is how new worlds are born, from the ashes of old ones. Night falls again. Trantor's sky, normally a perfect illusion, flickers uncertainly. But tonight, stars pierce through cracks in the atmospheric shield. Billions look up. For the first time in centuries, they see the actual night sky raw, unfiltered, infinite. Children gasp, elders weep, even hardened soldiers fall silent. For the first time, Trantor remembers that it is not alone, that beyond the metal shell of its own arrogance, a vast galaxy stretches into eternity. A galaxy that will one day hold two foundations, two beacons of knowledge, two guides through the night. The people do not know it yet, but destiny has already shifted. On Terminus, Seldon's shuttles touch down softly on an empty plain of wind-swept grass. There are no towers here, no sky lanes, no bureaucracy, no armies, just silence and possibility. Seldon steps onto the soil. It is impossibly light beneath his feet, a sensation he has never felt on Trantor's metal plating. A student whispers, "We're really at the end of the galaxy." Seldon smiles. "No," he says, "we're at the beginning." Behind him, supply crates are unloaded, portable labs unfolded, instruments activated. The Foundation has arrived, a humble group, a fragile seed, a flicker of purpose against the coming storm. But seeds grow. Flickers ignite, purpose endures. A new civilization has just taken its first breath. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Trantor, a child asks her mother, "What will happen now?" The mother looks at the stars, real stars, shining through the cracks. "I don't know," she whispers, "but something new is coming." Seldon stands atop a ridge overlooking the settlement site. A cold wind sweeps across the grass behind him. The first buildings are being erected. Small shelters, tiny research huts, the beginnings of something that one day will outshine the empire itself. He closes his eyes. In his mind, he sees the curve, the thousand-year path, the crises, the solutions, the rise of a second foundation hidden in the shadows. He sees the long night ahead, terrifying, chaotic, violent, but he also sees the dawn, a dawn humanity will reach if the plan holds. He opens his eyes. The stars glitter. The future calls. He whispers, "This is how history begins again." The camera would pull away here, rising above Seldon, above Terminus, above the distant ruins of Trantor, revealing the galaxy in all its dark, shimmering majesty. An empire has fallen. A plan has begun. A future has been set in motion. Not by rulers, not by armies, not by destiny alone, but by people, ordinary, frightened, extraordinary people, who refuse to surrender, to collapse. And now the question shifts, away from Trantor, away from the Empire, away from thousands of years of rise and fall. The question turns toward us, our world, our time, our empires, our illusions of permanence, because if psychohistory teaches anything, it is this: civilizations rise, civilizations fall, history repeats. Patterns return, and the future, our future, may already be written in the data we refuse to see. So as we watch Trantor's fall and Terminus's rise, a final question lingers, waiting, echoing, demanding attention. A question whispered by the ashes of worlds, a question that refuses to die, a question meant for us: if every empire must fall, can even our own world escape the same fate?